Welcome to Ministries That Podcast, where I talk to successful ministry leaders about how they're using podcasting to amplify their mission and grow their ministry so you can too. I'm Tim Hall, your host and owner of Sonomorphic, a podcast production company that specializes in podcasting for ministries. My guest today is Holly Mackle. She's a classical school librarian, the author of several books, and the host of the podcast Unseriously. We're going to talk about where the idea for asking quirky questions of notable normals came from, creating the custom theme song for her show, and her best advice for starting a podcast right now. So let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Holly Mackle. Well, Holly, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
I am so glad to be with you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I was first introduced to you and your podcast by Amy Gannett, who I recently had on the podcast, and saw that you're an author with Kaleidoscope, and I just had their founder on last episode, and so some great connections there. And I saw that you started Unseriously, your podcast, back in January, and the description for the podcast reads, "I'm Holly Mackle. Join me as I ask quirky questions of notable normals. Maybe you've heard what your favorite creatives are working on, but it's outright fun to hear about their most text emoji, what they put in their Costco buggy, or the last time they had a dance party. Ready for a little levity in your earbuds? Welcome to Unseriously." So now it might not sound like a ministry on the onset as you're listening to this description, but Holly is a follower of Jesus, has been doing a bunch of great work and encouraging her listeners with lots of laughs. So I'm glad to have you on the show today to hear about your podcasting journey. And so I'd love to just start here with like a look back on this year that you've had almost so far in podcasting. And how have you seen having a podcast amplify your ministry?
Tim, I'm so glad to be here. And starting out, I want to say I have a huge heart for discipleship, and I love serving in my local church context. I also love to write for those inside and outside of the church, and I love to teach the Bible too.
Yeah.
And it never fails that when I'm invited to speak or teach in other churches, the call typically goes something like, "We feel like our women need something a little bit lighter. So we wanted to see if you could come and teach at our women's retreat or for our women's event. And we want something that's still theologically rich, but just lighter in spirit. Are you our gal? Our women really need to laugh." And so I love that call so much. And I am very happy to do my absolute best to offer just that.
That's perfect. Yeah, so your day job is actually as a school librarian, and you're the author of several books. So what first attracted you to podcasts?
How do you feel about a roundabout answer to this
let's
question?
go. Yeah.
Okay. So my heartbeat is writing, and I've been at this writing gig for over 15 years now. And I have many, many projects in various stages of production. There's picture books and devotional and spiritual formation books, tons of stuff that has never seen the light of day. It's actually pretty excessive. But a little over a year ago, I completed and set out to query my middle grade novel. And I sent out my first query letter to my top agent, and she asks for a 2-month exclusive where you're not querying anyone else. So the 2 months came and went, and Tim, it was crickets. And when I realized that I really, really wasn't going to hear anything back from her, obviously I was heartbroken. And my husband, David, who is my biggest supporter in this whole thing, he looked at me and he said, "Enough. Stop querying, go build platform." Because as I'm sure that you know, these days platform is king, and it's next to impossible to get a project picked up off a slush pile without it. So I am terrible at Instagram. So the only other idea that I had that I'd been nursing for around 6 years was this little roundabout podcast concept, asking shabby and quirky questions of notable normals, people who are very serious and very gifted at the thing that they do. And by God's grace, it's really worked. The podcast is growing faster than I ever could have imagined that it would. And a couple months back, one of my dream publishers reached out to me, and they actually asked if I'd be interested in giving them a project that combines humor and theology. And I said, "Gosh, I hope I'm your girl." So I don't know if I'm going to get that deal or not. I pray that I do. But even the fact that they reached out and made that offer to begin with is such an encouragement.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point that, starting and building an audience and having that foundation can open up the possibilities to a bunch of different things. And you said you've been thinking about this podcast idea for 6 years, right?
Yes.
So where did that first idea come from, and how did that kind of evolve into, okay, I'm going to actually do this at the beginning of the year?
So a few things came together. I've always had a special place in my heart for the bits of an interview that feel a little bit more like they could have walked off the soundstage of a late night show.
Yeah.
So I love those parts where there's no pretense, just people having fun with one another, showing that people are just people, no matter how fancy of a person you are. And I also have always, my whole life, really enjoyed approaching a project from an unexpected place. I remember this master's class that I had in graduate school about liberation theology, and the professor was this foremost liberation theologian. And I remember thinking, something is off about this worldview. I can't quite put my finger on it. And so what I'm going to do is come at this and do my final thesis for this class, looking at the opposition to liberation theology. And so I researched the heck out of it and found out all this cool stuff. And he told me at the end, he said, you're the only person who's approached from this angle. And so that's kind of been my MO, like my whole life, like trying something from a different angle. And then lastly, the fact that there are just so many great podcasts out there right now that are asking really thoughtful questions of really interesting and thoughtful people. And I kind of wanted to do the opposite. I just wanted to ask Amy Gannett which American Girl doll she most identifies with. And it turns out the answer is pretty hilarious.
That's great. When my wife first brought up started listening to the show, so usually what happens is people will mention other folks that'll be great on the podcast.
Yeah.
And my wife will listen to them first and say, yeah, I think this is a great one. So she had started listening to your show when Amy brought it up, and she's listened to a bunch of the episodes at this point, and she's like, this is such a creative format. Like I've never had something, listen to it, just makes you laugh. It's those funny conversations that come up with, I feel like you're really good friends that you don't necessarily, you're not going to normally hear on a podcast, but you've decided, hey, this is what the thing is. And so along those lines, tell me a little bit about how you come up with these questions that you are then asking these folks.
So my secret weapon is actually my brother-in-law, Chase.
Okay.
And so Chase has this really fancy job where he sells, or I guess he is the rep for these medical devices. I will not be able to explain his job. I will just stumble all over myself. Just know he has this big, important job where surgeons all over the Southeast call him from the operating room and ask him how to work these medical devices. So he works with a lot of surgeons, but what he really wants to do is develop relationships with them. And so one of the ways that he has figured out he can do that is to not just ask good questions, but to ask like interesting questions that'll kind of like start these very like highbrow professional people sort of from a back foot. And so I find that I try to do the very same thing. And Chase and I, every few months, will sit together and kind of have a brainstorm, and Chase will like kick around some ideas. And then a lot of times I just take his ideas straight from him, and other times they sort of morph into some different ideas. So Chase is really the secret weapon, but I do get a lot of inspiration from everywhere. And there is this very lengthy iPhone note in my phone where if anything happened to it, I think I would cry.
Nice. So you're just like compiling questions after questions, and then as you get guests booked, you're just saying, okay, what do we want to pick and put on this episode? That's kind of how you build episodes.
Exactly.
Nice.
I do think that something that would benefit me would be some sort of really nice, robust spreadsheet to make sure that I'm not repeating the same questions of guests over and over. But of course, have I, sat down to actually create that spreadsheet yet, Tim? No, I have not.
No. And so therefore it stays on a note. And
That's right.
It's living well. And it's working out.
I just try to remember, like, who have I asked this gas station question to?
That's great. All right. I'd love to know. So you had this idea. It took a while before it actually became a show. What was your biggest fear about actually starting the podcast?
Yeah, sure. So as a writer, I'm really accustomed to putting my heart out there to varying and highly unpredictable levels of response. So to do this work, you have to have thick skin, and you have to have your identity so firmly grounded in Christ. And still, all of that, by God's grace, my ever deepening identity in Christ. In spite of all of that, I was so nervy when we started the podcast. And my friend Elizabeth Santelman came down from Oklahoma to teach me how to do the show. And so she was my first guest. And I could have just absolutely come out of my skin with nerves. And when we were recording that episode, I felt like I was outside of my body, looking down on myself, like highly scrutinizing every single word that was coming out of my mouth. It was just this really weird out-of-body experience. There were truly, Tim, only a couple moments of sheer forgetful joy when we were
Mm.
recording that episode. It was very few and far between, but there were just enough moments of forgetful joy where I thought, oh, I like this a whole lot and I want to keep doing it. So the question of would I ever record a second episode was not ever a question. It was like, here we go, and we're in. But I will say, I think as a woman, I'm always fighting that sort of too much, not enough paradigm. I'd actually be interested to hear if you feel this way as a podcaster. But in real life, I'm a very enthusiastic person. I have a lot of ideas. I love people. I love ideas. I love to talk about different sorts of things. And so I'm really laughy. Is that going to annoy people? I'm so enthusiastic, I can be very interrupty. Is that going to frustrate people? So, just that too much thing. And then the opposite side of that is, of course, like, this is such a dumb idea. No one's going to listen to this. Who's going to care? It's that not enough side of that coin. So do you struggle with that?
I feel like I do to some extent, for sure, in that. And part of it, I feel like I realize when we're doing the edits on the episode of like, man, I really wish I would have said that better. Or trying to figure out too, like how much to interject. Like, I've been working in podcasts for a decade. How much do I chime in with advice or bring certain things into it where like, but I don't want it to feel like I'm just having people on to tell them what they should do with their podcast. Like, that's not what we're trying to do here. So I want to be helpful, but not pushy with advice. And so, yeah, there is definitely that kind of, it's like, it's a tension, right?
Yeah,
it's like just a tension of, hey, how do I make sure that I'm being the host and bringing up great questions, but also like I do have experience in what I'm doing, so therefore I can bring that to the table, but not bringing it so much that I'm talking over people or bringing up stuff that isn't actually helpful, that's just interesting to me, or that I feel like sometimes can happen too, of like, I'm really interested in this something, technology something, but are most people going to care about that? Probably not. So maybe I shouldn't ask that question, even though I want to know, but maybe most people don't. So there's definitely some of that for sure that I feel like I try to balance well. So that's, thanks for asking. It's fun to have the back and forth, and having guests ask questions back. I always find that fun too.
I love that as well.
So a lot of podcasters release their show every week, or every other week, or some nature like that. But you've chosen to release episodes of Unseriously a whole season at a time. And you specifically said in the trailer that it's a binge-friendly listen. So tell me more about that decision and how it served your audience.
Yeah. So my husband, David, and I made that decision very early on based on where we are in life and the busyness of life. We have 2 teen daughters, and we thought it would best serve our family rhythms and other various projects that I have my hands in, because again, with like always wanting to be a part of various projects. And it really was the sweetest way to start, by God's grace, because the analytics didn't lie and the numbers told a story. So that first drop, when we first put those first 6 episodes out there, and the Spotify numbers, which are real time, or probably reasonably close to real time of downloads and listens, those numbers were at 0. And then that first day of launch, you could watch people traveling through the episodes as the day went on. Tim, they were binging. And so we released those 6, and the number of listens just traveled down, down, down. Every time we checked back in, David kept calling and texting me all day. What are the numbers now? He was probably even more excited than I was. And I knew that day, that very first day, that we had something because of the way the numbers were traveling down. And that's still to this day, one of the things that I hear the most about the podcast is that people finish a season in 1 or 2 days, that they're continuing to binge it. But I would love to say here on your podcast first that in the new year, Unseriously is moving to a weekly show.
Gotcha. So tell me a little bit about that decision then. So like it's obviously worked well to do the seasons and dropping them all at once. It's been performing well, but then you're going to change the frequency then in the new year. Tell me about why you decided, hey, now is the time to make that change, and what you're looking forward to is, hey, this is the hope in doing that.
So what I realized is that what won't change is sort of my scheduling and recording and editing calendar.
Sure.
The only thing that will change is when the episodes are technically released. So right now I'm on like a seasonal calendar. So there will still be breaks when there won't be a weekly episode, but there will be shorter breaks than between what's happening right now.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that it will become a weekly habit of people that on, Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, they're like, oh, wait, I've got a new episode of Unseriously for this basket of laundry that I'm going to sit here folding.
Yeah.
So we're going to try it and see what happens. But what's definitely served us up to this point has been the drops of 6 at a time. But we're going to make the shift, and who knows, maybe I'll go back to the other.
I think you'll stay with weekly. I think
You
it's
think
going to
so?
be. I think it's going to be as validating as the data that you saw with the 6 episode drops. I think it'll be even stronger by releasing weekly, because there's a couple different ways to look at this, right? You have the binge side of things that people can go from one to the next. But when the season is done and they're waiting for the next season to come out, you're giving people, unfortunately, the opportunity to forget about you.
Right.
But when you're doing weekly, it kind of builds in that normal rhythm of, hey, I'm like you're saying, like, I'm going to listen to this week's episode while I'm folding the laundry.
Yeah.
It helps build into people's rhythm. And as people are creatures of habit, that will most likely become more and more a part of people's rhythm. And I think you'll see additional success on top of that. Because at least how, in my experience of releasing multiple episodes at once, now, it's a little bit different because the shows that I was working on were usually weekly, and then sometimes we'd drop more than the weekly episode would be, anywhere between 2 to 4 episodes at one time. And what we saw was actually we gave people more than they expected, and so therefore they didn't know what to listen to, or the way that they were listening to it on Apple Podcasts and the way that it worked at the time. If you released a certain number of episodes, it would basically stop delivering new episodes to listeners that hadn't listened to the most recent 5 episodes.
Oh, no.
It was something like that. And so when we were giving them some great content from a business and leadership conference, and we did these daily episodes on top of the normal weekly episode, but then our download numbers would spike because a lot of people would download those episodes, but then after the fact, it would actually drop. We would have less people come back to the normal weekly rhythm.
Okay.
And so there was a bunch of different things that fed into that. It's odd, but also makes sense that if you change people's expectations,
right,
and don't tell them, or
True.
basically change it without giving them the proper expectation shift, that's basically what's going to hurt the most. Even though we would tell them, hey, we're going to give you great episodes this week.
Yeah.
If they don't listen to them or don't engage with them, sometimes that can, depending on the platform. I'm pretty sure Apple has changed the way that works, but they've also changed the way the auto downloads work, and downloads have gone down across the board. But anyway, this is one of the points where I feel like I'm rambling about podcast nerdy things.
This is the stuff I have no clue about. So I will take all of this information that you feel like giving.
Yeah. So I think it's going to serve the show well. But yeah, I'm glad to hear too that it's gone well from the beginning. And I think that'll be a great foundation to continue building upon. So you have a fantastic custom theme song to the show that when I was doing research and listening to a few episodes, I was like, this is great. And so I'm actually play that clip right here so you can hear it.
I'm Holly Mackle, and welcome to Join me as I ask quirky questions of notable normals. Maybe you've heard.
All right, now where did you get the inspiration to do this like custom jingle for the podcast?
So my husband is a huge music buff. He is a really big music guy. And from the jump, he said, you have got to have a great theme song. And so we kicked around all these ideas. And I just kept saying to him, I just feel like Adam could nail this. Like, I feel like he would knock this out the park. And so Adam is our friend, Adam Wright of the band Act of Congress and also of the Corner Room Music. And he's this crazy talented musician. He plays all these different instruments and he's super creative in all these different directions. And he is our friend. But again, with that whole like too much, not enough thing, I just had the weirds about asking him, to step in and to create something for this unproven idea, this unproven project. But I could not get him out of my head. And so one day I was like, you know what? He's a grown man. He can say yes or no.
Yeah.
And so I said to David, I'm just going to ask him and see what he says. So Adam was very enthusiastic, which was also so encouraging. I'm very grateful to him. And he came back very quickly with this really great piano, kind of almost like a vaudeville feel type number. No lyrics at that point, but it was great. And I thought that that was it. But David goes, "This is really good. Will you give him the note to go a little bit more, 2.5 Men?" And I was like, okay. Well, 2.5 Men is, of course, this like super trashy show that David and I used to watch, like back before kids. And so I loved Adam's first submission, remember? And so I felt weird about going back to him, but David was like, just do it. Just give him the note, see what he says. So I gave Adam the note, and then Adam returned the second attempt, which is what you just heard. And I feel that he absolutely clocked it out the park. I feel like it's a bop, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm so grateful to him. But specifically for the listeners of your show, I'd love to say that Adam is interested in getting into more projects like creating podcast intros. And so maybe we could include his email or his contact in the show notes.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just a great experience for a listener to hear music. I've only heard of, I feel like, a handful of shows that do this really, really well. That, for my show, I picked a piece of music. I tried to edit it so it kind of lands well within how I'm doing the intro. But to have something custom, I think of another one that I've heard that has done this really well is Annie F. Downs. It just adds more personality to the show. I feel like you can bring people in and have them feel the vibe for the show so quickly by having something custom that just fits so well like yours does. And so people kind of get that vibe. Within 30 seconds, they know this is going to be a fun and funny show to listen to, and that adds to that vibe. And so that's great.
Well, that is all Adam, and he is great at that. And I know that he could do it for so many other shows far beyond Unseriously.
All right, so I'd asked you about how you've come up with questions a little bit ago, and I have a question off of that. As you're going and tying questions to different people, is there a question or a few questions that you keep wanting to insert for everybody that's like a favorite question? You're like, maybe I should rearrange how I'm saying this because I just want to keep asking this question?
Yeah. So if I ask you my favorite question, Tim, do you promise to answer it?
Sure.
Okay. So I find that all the best questions have like a gritty element to them.
Okay.
And I think that's because maybe sort of at all of our core, we're all like a little bit gross. And so my absolute hands down favorite question is, if you are on a road trip and you are going to stop at a convenience store, what snack and drink are you going to get?
Yeah. So snack, and I feel like I've been trying to be more health conscious of things. But what I would normally do is get a bag of pizza combos. and until this one incident where we had pop all over the car, I would also say Code Red Mountain Dew.
Okay.
But we had a bad experience one time where we got, that you either can buy the bottle for like $1 or something, or you can get the fountain drink with the lid, but I got the very large cup because it was only a few cents more, right, than the normal reasonable size. And of course, one of the times I go to pick it up, the lid squeezes off and it spilled.
Oh, man.
And sloshed on my lap and on the console in the middle. And
I can't remember. Is a mess.
It was, I think there's still some residue in the car from that experience. And after that, my wife was like, "Tim, we're not doing that anymore.
And you're cut off, buddy."
So now we mostly drink water in the car. It's sweet tea sometimes, but try to avoid the Code Red Mountain Dew. And it's not good for you. And
it's really not.
So
anyway. You just kind of proved my point with the pizza combos and the Code Red Mountain Dew. And I will never understand what it is about grown men and flavored Mountain Dew. I just don't get it. My husband loves a Baja Blast.
Oh, yeah.
And he'll come back with like a Taco Bell cup, just like you're talking about with Baja Blast. And I'm like, I can't. I just cannot with you.
That's great.
So yeah, hey, you just proved my point because nothing sounds grosser right now than Code Red and pizza combos.
Yeah. And as I'm saying that out loud, it's like, that kind of sounds good, but also sounds awful. So
it sounds like a little tummy rumble to me.
Yeah. Well, in the trailer of Unseriously, you said that parents, no fear, I'll keep it G-rated unless otherwise noted. And then you create bonus PG episodes at the end of the seasons with some funny moments that aren't meant for kids. And so I'd love to hear more about the idea to specifically filter some of that content that maybe is not suitable for kids to be, hey, Mom, what does she mean by that?
Right.
From the backseat, and make those separate episodes.
Yeah. So I knew from the jump that I did not just want to interview people like us, people that follow Jesus and believe in him. But these days, it's just, quite frankly, too complicated of a landscape to vet everyone, whether they are inside the church or outside the church, to figure out if everything they could ever possibly say, far beyond an hour podcast recording, is going to be something that you could endorse, be that theologically or not.
Yeah.
So because we just are here, I decided, all right, I want to talk to believers and unbelievers alike. I want to honor both. And I want to acknowledge that with unbelievers, there are going to be topics that come up and views expressed that would not necessarily align with what we believe that Scripture teaches. And, God is so kind. And guess what? The Holy Spirit indwells us, and we don't have to be afraid of those types of conversations. We can engage wholeheartedly and fearlessly, and we can also do so in a winsome way that might actually leave that person where they walk away from the conversation and think, wow, that was one Christian that wasn't actually so terrible. And so I want to have kingdom eyes with this show and just with my life in general. But the truth is, you're right, there would be a bit of a branding issue for me because I do have several children's books out and I want to continue to write children's books, especially children's picture books. Yeah. So enter the PG episode. And listen, if you come on Seriously, you want to make the PG episode. And I have all of these very proper people come on and they're like, oh, I just don't know if I should say that. And I kind of want to be like, you want to say that, because what I am finding is that people really love seeing some of these folks that they respect so deeply, just show their ankle a little bit and show that they're just a real normal person. So yeah, PG is one of my most favorite things, especially to edit. It's really fun.
Yeah. Well, speaking of editing, in the episode with Hunter Be Less, you talked about editing your own podcast and discovering vocal quirks as you get started doing that. What are one or two that you still frequently find yourself editing out?
This is so embarrassing, I am a repeater. It's so annoying. I can't just say, that's cool. I'm more likely to say, that's cool, so cool. And I don't know how to fix this. I think I'm probably just too old for it. But beyond that, I'm also an interrupter. And I can give myself a little bit more grace on the interruption scale because as an enthusiastic person, it's something I do in real life normally. But in real life, you have the ability to see a person's face and to sort of read facial, expressions and things like that. That doesn't come off necessarily as well in a podcast. And my friend Elizabeth Santelman from Sunshine in My Nest, one of the first pieces of advice she gave me was to say that the single most important person in the conversation is the person that you cannot see. It's the listener. And so when you are trying to listen without any visual feedback to something, I find that interruptions are really frustrating. And I actually often don't listen to podcasts that really have a lot of interrupting because it frustrates me. And so because I'm doing the editing, I have the ability to edit myself and the guest to make us sound like the most polite people in the entire world. And so I have no struggles interrupting on my podcast episodes like I do in real life. So yeah, fix it on edit is my trick.
That is one of those interesting things that, in a normal conversation, you'll easily hop on and jump in on topics. But yeah, when you just hear the audio, if you close your eyes in those conversations, it gets real confusing.
Yes.
Or just just annoying, really. It's like, wait, what were they going to say? Wait, hold on. Yeah. But when you're sitting with friends and you have those visual cues, it's actually funny. And so it is one of those things where the medium helps, or I guess hinders in this case, change the way that a listener is going to perceive it. And so, yeah, there is definitely some editing you have to do. I do that too. I feel like verbal affirmations wise, I overdo it frequently. But the great part is most of my conversations actually all of the conversations I've done for this show have been remote. And so I can just take it out. There's no mic bleed. But I feel like I do the same thing where I'll repeat myself and say something in a different way right after I just said it. And then it's hard to edit it together because I set it at 2 different speeds and stuff. And so it's like, well,
Yes.
there we go. It's
going out like that. It is a
it's just
trickier edit,
is.
isn't it?
It is.
But the
It is.
interrupting thing I feel like is so tricky because it's kind of like talking with food in your mouth.
Mm.
If you're face to face with someone, it's perceived differently than if we were to like talk to each other right now with like pizza combos and code red.
Yeah. Well, Holly, what have been some of the best byproducts of producing a podcast? You already mentioned about the potential book deal that you were talking about. What are some other ways that the podcast has helped bring about some other opportunities?
I would say hands down that it's been the people. Most of these people that I'm talking to, I have not met in real life at this point. The first season was overarchingly my in real life friends.
Sure.
But now there are so many people from so many different realms that I just would never rub elbows with. And these people, most of them are so genuine and funny and really down to earth. And I find that so appealing. And I'm also really grateful for the handful of friendships that have come out of these interviews. And that's been a lot of fun. And then the opportunities have been quite remarkable and something that I didn't really expect. Potential for this book deal is a really fun thing. But beyond that, take, for example, tomorrow night, I'll be moderating an event for Kate Strickler of the Naptime Kitchen here at Little Professor, which is a bookstore here in town. And I can't wait for that event. It's going to be so fun. And also, I have mentioned that I really love to teach the Bible. And so when I look at the opportunities to do so outside of my own church context this year, I would say that those opportunities are probably 4 times what they were last year at this time. And so that's been a really big blessing, just to, again, expand that platform.
Yeah, for sure. That's great to hear. All right. Well, what's your best advice for somebody that's thinking about starting a podcast right now with your 1 year of experience about at this point?
Well, I would say 2 things. First, I'll pass along the advice that was the straw that broke the camel's back to get Unseriously off the bench and out into the airwaves. And it's from Elizabeth Santelman of Sunshine in My Nest again. And when I was hemming and hawing back and forth with her on Voxer about whether or not to do this, one day she said to me, "What are you afraid of?" And I did not have a good answer. And so that was like, okay, maybe it's time to move forward. And then this is the other thing that I just have to remind myself of all the time. And it's funny because I can really embrace this in the writing world different than I can in the podcast world. So I have to remind myself of this with this project. But this is just a project for me. It doesn't have to be something that I do for the rest of my life. If I stop liking it or stop enjoying it, or it starts to be difficult to get guests to want to come on the show, I can stop. One of my very favorite podcasts of all time, I don't even know how many times we've been through this podcast, but are you familiar with the Reformed Kidcast?
I'm not, no.
It is an excellent show, and it is a closed podcast.
Okay.
And so Les Lampierre set out to go through the catechism with his own children. And so that is a closed set. And so he started and knew when the end point would be. And I have to remind myself, and maybe that's good for all of us, for you, me, for anyone listening, to go, just because I start this doesn't mean that it has to go on forever. I can try this for 6 episodes, and I can pick it back up in a couple of years if I want to. I can have the freedom to do that.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right, well, what are you excited about for the future of Unseriously?
I mean, these guests who have condescended to be on this quirky and ratty little show for season 4 and in the new year, some of these folks I am about to record with, I could just pinch myself. I told you before we started recording that I'm preparing questions for Colin Hansen. I'll get those out to him later today. I have so much admiration for him. I'm so grateful to him. And just like the things that I'm coming up with to ask him, I'm like, I should probably be embarrassed to like know that I'm about to ask Colin Hansen this question, but I'm good with it. So Colin's coming on, Davy Flowers, the fabulous illustrator, Chris Van Dusen, and then the wonderful Bible teacher, Lauren Washer. They're all slated for the new year or for season 4. And so I'm really excited. But Tim, I know this show, and I know that you're about to transition to the high pass segment.
I am.
I just feel it in my bones. So before you do, can I ask you a question?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to ask what advice that you would give to me, still a newbie at this stage, a year into Unseriously.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly probably would give you the advice that you're actually already doing, which is look at switching to weekly. Because, so like when I coach people to start their podcasts, I'm usually telling them, hey, let's do weekly or bi-weekly. and we can always increase frequency, but cutting back frequency always feels a little weird. So you don't want to go out, don't want to start weekly if you can't sustain that. So basically, like what you did, you knew you could sustain the drops of 6 episodes. And then now you're to the point where, hey, I think I can do this weekly. It's a similar workload. You're still doing stuff in about the same rhythm. There's obviously some more episodes that you're going to be creating than the seasons that you've been making. But that, I think, would probably be the main thing. I feel like the audio quality's been great. The microphone that you use is one that I recommend people, if they're just getting started. The Samson Q2U is a great dynamic microphone that you can set in front of you, and it really sounds great. Like you're hearing me on an SM7 and you're hearing Holly on the Samson Q2U. And I don't think you would realize that this one happens to cost hundreds of dollars more.
Oh,
okay. To some extent, it's really what sounds good on your voice. And getting started with a great USB dynamic mic is the place to start. And so I feel like those are the 2 biggest things that I usually am helping people make sure they get right, is the audio quality. It's something I am passionate about, as well as how can we set the show up frequency-wise to be consistent so that people know when you're coming and keep continuing to show up and kind of build that into the rhythm of your life. And so I feel like those are the 2 biggest things, and you're already doing both of them, which is great. So I think the next thing maybe to look at is to probably take a look at the data and see how that change goes. Like, I think that would be the most interesting thing next is, okay, we've been doing it this way. We've been seeing these results. Let's look at that. And then another thing, are you doing anything with podcast advertising or monetizing the show? What does that kind of look like for you right now?
I would love to have sponsors. I actually had a publisher, a different one from the one who was interested in working with me. It's a secular publisher, actually reach out to me a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, can I put you in touch with our publicity department? We'd love to advertise on your show. And she said, can you send over, I think she asked for the kit or something like that. And I was like, I don't have one. So how would you suggest that I go about creating something like that?
Yeah. So a media kit is what advertisers are looking for to basically give them a few different things. One, what's this show about? And then, so like usually you have the description as part of it. It's basically just a 1-pager. I build them in Canva. So you got a 1-pager that you're creating with a block of text of here's what the show is about. Usually just the podcast description is mostly what you need there. Some branding kind of stuff with usually throw the album artwork or the cover art on there as well. And then what advertisers want to see is, okay, how many people am I going to reach if I put an ad on your show? What is the audience looking like right now? And so I'm going to pull one out. So I have the exact things that I am normally putting on one of these, and I'll walk through it. Yeah, so there's some branding that goes at the top. Then there's a text block that's usually like the description of the show. And then some key information, lifetime downloads of the podcast, the average monthly downloads, and then the number of podcast followers. And I usually am adding together Apple and Spotify to give a total there. And then down farther, I have the podcast album artwork, the episode frequency. So this one releases weekly, what category it sits in, and then top states that people are listening in. So then like audience demographics, male, female split, age split. And sometimes if you have I'm trying to remember what the acronym is, but basically like the household income of your listeners. Usually you can only get that once you've actually like surveyed them and asked, hey, here's some demographic questions. Where do you fall within these brackets of things? But that helps give advertisers a good idea of like, oh, well, our product is in this price range, and usually we're looking for a household income of about this size because they have a discretionary income of, this that they're able to spend on products like this. And so therefore it's a good fit, or we're way outside of that or something of that nature, depending on what the product is. And then it's always helpful to have follower numbers on different social platforms just as a reference point too. And then I have those linked that go out to those. So if you click on it, it just jumps straight to there. But yeah, this is just built in Canva. I had kind of developed this template with a little help from a template that I got from Fallon Klug over at That Sounds Fun Network.
Yeah.
And kind of built this out. So this is roughly what I'm doing for folks as we build media kits.
I just took a big old page of notes. That was very helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome. Now we're going to jump into the high pass segment where we ignore the lows and I ask you about some of your favorite things. So the first question, I saw that you have a garden, so I'd love to know what's your favorite thing to grow in your garden?
Yes. So I have to tell you that we moved over the summer to a new house.
Okay.
And my old house had this quite large, very beloved garden. And so this past summer was our last season with that garden as we moved out of the house, end of June. And I tell you, Tim, the blackberries and the peaches really showed up and showed out to say farewell to us. And it just kind of added to the heartbreak of saying farewell to that house. And one of the first things that I did when we got here was I did not dig them myself because you have to use big post hole diggers and we have Alabama red clay. It was not me.
Yeah.
But our very beloved landscaper did dig the posts I use a method called primocane suppression for blackberry growth.
Okay.
And so you plant these blackberry bushes up these posts and then they grow up and across some wire and you suppress down to just 2 canes per bush, and they just absolutely put out so many blackberries. And so it won't be this coming summer that we'll have a good season, but hopefully this next summer I'll get to return to a little bit of my former house's garden glory with the blackberries coming on strong here.
Love it. Yeah. All right. What's your favorite book that you've read this summer?
Hands down, it is Theo of Golden. Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's Alan Levi, the fabulous storyteller, songwriter. He's just, jack of all trades. And I have had less than 5 people say no to coming on Unseriously or just pass, I guess is the nice way to say it. But I was in email conversation with Alan Levi's assistant and he said, Alan just has so much going on right now. He's going to have to pass on this. And I was so sad. So if anybody out there has got an in with Alan Levi, I am a genuine appreciator of his work. And I loved Theo of Golden. And oh my goodness, I want to get that guy on Unseriously.
Nice. Yeah. All right. What's one of your favorite stories about how Unseriously has impacted a listener's life?
Yeah. The favorite thing that people will say to me, and this could be an in-person friend, whether they tell me face-to-face or text me this, or somebody on Instagram, they'll message me, but it's some iteration of, I was having a bad day, I put on Unseriously. And that does my heart so much good because that really is kind of the crux behind this whole thing, is just to help people remember our hope that we have in Christ and to just lift our eyes heavenward and remind ourselves that something so much better is coming than this world. And so that is the best and highest compliment that I think that Unseriously could receive. And then I had this really fun conversation with Sean Dietrich. He was one of the earlier episodes of the show. And I remember I asked him, how do you hope your books make people feel? And he said, just in his perfect Sean way, he goes, better. But I cannot tell you how many times I've thought about that. And if I really had to say, how do you hope Unseriously makes people feel? I would give the same answer. I just hope it makes people feel better.
Nice. Well, Holly, as we close today's episode, who else do you think would be a great guest for this podcast?
Well, I've already mentioned her twice on here, so I'm going to say her a third time. I think you really need to talk to Elizabeth Santelman of Sunshine in My Nest. I love the way she thinks. Again, she is somebody that, in a different way than me, but she comes at things from such an interesting angle. Yeah. And I remember this conversation I had with her years ago where we were talking about Instagram, where she has quite a large and very dedicated platform. And I was just asking her how she viewed it. And she said, I feel like so many people come to Instagram here I am. And she said, I ask God to help me go into Instagram with eyes that say, there you are. And that is something about Elizabeth that I appreciate on so many different levels. I feel like her podcast does much the same thing. And she's been talking to some really cool people. So I would strongly recommend that. She actually just talked to Kate Strickler the other day. I got to listen to that one just a few days ago. So yeah, definitely Elizabeth.
Great. Well, Holly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your journey and some of the behind the scenes of this show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was my honor.
That was a fun conversation with Holly, and getting to answer her favorite question to ask guests on her podcast was probably more than you bargained for on today's episode, but she's definitely having unique conversations that are bringing lots of laughs to her listeners. You can listen to Unseriously with the link in the show notes. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Ministries That Podcast, produced by Sonomorphic. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you follow or subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend. That's the best way to support this show, and together we'll help more ministries grow and thrive through podcasting. Now come back in 2 weeks to hear my conversation with Jeff Zog. He's the founder and host of Dad Awesome, where he's walking with dads as they lead and love their kids towards God's awesomeness. We're going to talk about the 10-episode test that's become 400 episodes and counting, the moments where he's felt like quitting and why he keeps going, and how the podcast has led to a sustainable ministry without podcast ads. Well, until next time, keep encouraging your audience as they follow Jesus.